Hi, I'm back. Okay, as promised, here is a video about the star card. I was doing a horoscope spread like I said in my previous video for a client. I don't want to get into personal details. But in the second position for unearned income and values, I got the star card inverted. Now when you look at the star card, we have to remember a few things. It looks like a bright card, and it is. But we do have to remember that the star card comes just after the tower. And in the star card, we can see it's still night. So the person is not quite out of the woods yet. And as we know, the star card is followed by the moon, a time of uncertainty and perhaps fear, and so the star card has a few steps to take before it reaches the sun. So when we're dealing with the star card, let's say you ask a question and you get the star card and you think it's positive. So let's say the question was about will my relationship with my friend be better this time? And you get the star card. It's a positive card, but you ought to know that you're not quite out of the woods yet, and that you probably still will have to face the moon, depending on the other cards you're reading. Well, what's interesting about the star card is a few things. We only have a few cards in the Rider-Waite deck where the character in the card is naked, and I'm gonna get back to that later. So it looks like some kind of ritual this person is performing, and it reminds me kind of the Temperance card, the card that comes before the Tower. And in the Temperance card, the angel is neatly dressed. He is or she is the alchemist, and he's mixing cups. It seems that maybe the water is flowing upright into the other cup, and he is trying to balance things, temper things. But as the Fool journeys through the major arcana, we can assume that the Temperance card eventually ran into an obstacle when it got to the Tower. Now, the Tower can be positive or negative, depending again on the card surrounding the question, but the Temperance card ran into trouble, and that's the Tower card. It's something undesirable and maybe not pleasant. We hear that people say the Tower card clears often the path to our next success, or it helps us to clear things up, or it can be some kind of revelation or breakthrough. But when you're reading cards and say the Tower comes up in a future position, or let's say you're doing a Celtic cross and the Tower is at the base of the reading, the card on the left way below. So this is the third card, by the way, and the reading just kind of gets worse after that. So you can imagine it's taking longer for you to clear up the trouble. And the journey towards the star, through the moon, with its destination, the sun, it's gonna be a rough ride. But there's one thing the Temperance card and the Star card has in common, and that's the cups or jars the person is using. And this was interesting to me. In the Temperance card, it seems the individual is mixing things, but it doesn't directly concern him so much. And maybe with the Star card, we are taught it's better to self-reflect, because for the first reason is uh, the person seems to be more personally involved in the Star card, trying to solve or clear away or rejuvenate their problems, than the one in the Temperance card. Uh, in the Temperance card, the individual seems to concentrate very hard, but we end up with the Tower. In the Star card, the individual is more relaxed, but we end up with the Moon. Now, what's different between the Moon and the Tower? Hi, yes, there was somebody at the gate. I just quickly had to tend to that. Okay, so what's different between going from Temperance to the Tower and going from the Star to the Moon? I think the positive attributes between those two is with Temperance going to the Tower, there is a clearing and a destruction of old ideas. And with the Star going to the Moon is facing your fears, or facing a time of learning to know how to deal with your own confusion. And that kind of makes sense. But the Star, I would like to believe, has progressed further than the Temperance card itself. So it's one step closer to the Sun. And I think one of the mistakes the Temperance card has made, if you have to look at the negative aspects, is it's been focusing externally on problems, whereas and it's met with the Tower card. And here we can see focusing externally on things seldom solves the problem. We need to localize and look into ourselves, and this is what the Star card is doing. And the Star card, he or she, let's say she because it is a woman, kind of learns about her own personal fears and so on before she moves on to the Moon. I beg your pardon, to the Sun. But what was striking to me about the Star card is she's performing this ritual, and she's pouring water into the little pond, and also pouring water onto the ground. And I couldn't help but think that this is internalizing more, because we have to take into account this person traveled probably a far journey to reach that isolated area, and then they took off their clothes. Now, this to me means, and this is at least how I interpreted the reading with the horoscope spread for my client, in the values position, in the second position of the horoscope. It's about you could say it's about having shame about certain things. So when we are ashamed about certain things, we kind of keep ourselves dressed, and we don't want to face that part of ourselves or a situation. But when we're naked, we have confidence. Nakedness is not just about this or that, but I think it's also about having peace with yourself, being confident enough to stand figuratively speaking, naked in front of a situation and be shameless and blameless about many things. And I think when she pours the water into the pond, she's adding positive ideas to her emotions, to herself, because I think the pond in a way represents something about the woman self. Uh, and when she's pouring water onto the soil or onto the ground, she's taking away negative ideas and allowing nature to purify it, or, uh, well, with earth, you have uh, time, because there seems to be a connectivity to time when it comes to earthly things. Earth has to, if you bury something, it slowly absorbs it back into nature. And I think this could be helpful if we allow our emotions, if we free ourselves from negative emotions, we can slowly see how that uh, is released back into nature. And we can do this in many ways. We can do this through self-expression or talking to people, and allow other things or other people to absorb that. And maybe, since there are also flowers growing, flowers have the ability to, well, the ground in itself has the ability to purify certain um, conditions of fluids, and use that positively. What may be undrinkable to you is good for flowers. Uh, we have the idea of compost, for example, and excuse me, and we have the idea of many things that are more useful to plants than it is to us. So again, this could be self-expression. You could take negative feelings and push it into art or some form of self-expression. But when the card is inverted, like in this question, you have the idea of maybe you're putting in more negative ideas than you're taking out negative ideas. Or maybe you are not putting in as much positive emotions into yourself. So this is a ritual of purification. Um, and we cannot face anything if we do not somehow uh, have confidence. Again, back to the nakedness. If we cannot find a way to shed our shames or bad feelings and have confidence, because this was a question about having confidence, or if I recall correctly, the tarot suggested we do a reading about the, as a significator, the King of Wands, which is a very uh, satisfied and confident person, a very charismatic person. And I don't think we can be like that if we don't somehow have the courage, or uh, the inner freedom to rid ourselves of our shames. I think this somehow connects back to my previous video about what I made about my mind is my enemy, and maybe it could somehow refer back to that. So we need to shed ourselves, figuratively speaking, of our clothes and be more confident. And since it's in the second position of the horoscope spread, referring to values, I think the way we look at ourselves influences our values. We kind of forget about the things we love, and we don't do it anymore, because we have this inability to purge ourselves from negative feelings and to add positive feelings into our lives. Um, so, if you cannot purge yourself from your shames, I think your mind state will eventually take over, and you'll have less interests or less interest in the things you love, and you'll just lose interest altogether in the things you love, or you will not be able to enjoy them as much anymore. So those are a few ideas about the star. Let me know what you think. You can leave your comments and questions below, and my email is in the credits. Cheers.